So the Trudeau government just keeps looking more and more and more corrupt all the time. I think it's because he's terrible, but that's just my opinion. Here's the headline. Cabinet learned of potential breakthrough as Trudeau government invoked Emergencies Act. The revelations were released as part of disclosure for ongoing court challenges arguing the threshold for invoking the act wasn't met. And what is the threshold? What is the Emergencies Act for? For the purposes of this act, a national emergency is an urgent and critical situation of a temporary nature that A, seriously endangers the lives, health, or safety of Canadians and is of such proportions or nature as to exceed the capacity or authority of a province to deal with, or seriously threatens the ability of the Government of Canada to preserve the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of Canada, and that cannot be effectively dealt with under any other law in Canada. So endangering the lives, health, or safety of Canadians. So I don't know, has anybody ever died in a bouncy castle before? I guess somebody could be hit by somebody waving a flag by accident or something. I don't know about that. How about seriously threatens the ability of the Government of Canada to preserve the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of Canada? Yeah, did anybody think that Canada's sovereignty was at risk? You know, the territorial integrity of Canada? No, nobody believed that, including Trudeau. But let's get into this. Heavily redacted minutes of a cabinet meeting held on the eve of the Trudeau government's invocation of the Emergencies Act suggest officials were on the brink of a potential breakthrough with the Freedom Convoy blockade of downtown Ottawa, court documents suggest. So what's going on? There's a court challenge. There's a lawsuit arguing the threshold for invoking the act, the Emergencies Act, wasn't met, and documents have been released as part of disclosure in that. The revelation, first reported by the Toronto Star, is contained within minutes of a cabinet meeting held February 13th, one day before the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced Canada's first ever invocation of the Emergencies Act to clear ongoing Freedom Convoy blockades in downtown Ottawa and at land border crossings across the country. So was that really necessary to clear the land crossings, for instance? Well, the big one that got almost all the attention was the Ambassador Bridge. And here we have a headline, Ambassador Bridge reopens after police clear Windsor blockade. February 13th, one day before Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act. So they'd already cleared that one, the main blockade. Now, the one in Alberta, for instance, wasn't cleared until the 15th. But as we can see, progress was already being made. But anyway, the meeting, chaired by the Prime Minister and attended by senior cabinet and government officials, included an update from National Security and Intelligence Advisor Jody Thomas that hints at unexplained and unelaborated progress being made in clearing blockades. Quote, the National Security and Intelligence Advisor indicated that law enforcement gains have been important and there was potential for a breakthrough in Ottawa, Ontario, and that the RCMP was taking enforcement action in Coutts, Alberta. I read the document under a heading entitled Situation Update. So law enforcement gains have been important and there was a potential for a breakthrough in Ottawa, Ontario. And let's go back to the act itself. And that cannot be effectively dealt with under any other law in Canada. Starting to feel like the threshold for invoking the act wasn't met, was it? So it looks like most of the document was redacted prior to disclosure, so no details of the breakthrough were provided. The meeting was held between 8 and 10 p.m. on February 13th, the evening before the Prime Minister announced the invocation of the Emergencies Act, the first time the legislation had been used since its inception in 1988 as a replacement for the War Measures Act. Unredacted portions of the minutes also say Thomas advised a number of border crossings were still experiencing blockages despite efforts by local police to keep them open. But again, the main one in Windsor, that had already been resolved. The Emergencies Act is supposed to be last resort. And this doesn't sound like last resort to me. Quote, she noted that the threat picture with respect to ideologically motivated violent extremism remains stable and unchanged. You can translate that as there wasn't any, but that the Canadian Security and Intelligence Service continues to watch persons of interest. Despite also seeing heavy attention from government censors, minutes of an incident response group meeting held earlier on February 13th contained an update from Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino, where he reported great progress had been made to secure the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor, Ontario, but no timeline existed on when the bridge may reopen. And of course, the week-long blockade of the Ambassador Bridge would end that evening, following negotiations with protesters and a number of arrests. And again, none of this is sounding like a threat to the sovereignty of Canada, is it? In fact, it's sounding like there was reason for optimism. And, maybe a responsible prime minister who actually cared about the people of Canada might have operated in good faith, perhaps. But it says here, marked secret and heavily redacted, the records were released as part of disclosure for ongoing court challenges commenced by the Canadian Constitutions Foundation and the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. I'm glad they're finally doing something, arguing the threshold for invoking the act wasn't met. But what does the public safety minister have to say about it? Well, Alexander Cohen, spokesperson for Minister Mendicino, told the National Post the potential for breakthroughs referred to negotiations, quote, led principally by the city of Ottawa with illegal blockaders in the days leading up to the government's invocation of the Emergencies Act. Quote, the government closely monitored the status of negotiations, which were disavowed by many associated with the so-called Freedom Convoy and were ultimately unsuccessful. The government considered this as a factor in the decision to invoke the Emergencies Act. Well, they wouldn't lie to us, would they? Okay. Mendicino was misunderstood when he said police asked for the Emergencies Act. Oh, okay. That's according to an official. A senior official in the Department of Public Safety says the minister has been misunderstood in saying police asked the federal government to use the Emergencies Act in February. Deputy Minister Rob Stewart appeared at the special joint committee that's examining the Liberals' decision to invoke the act. In April, Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino told the same committee after weeks of blockades in downtown Ottawa and at several border crossings, the government was in regular consultation with law enforcement, including the RCMP. The advice we received was to invoke the Emergencies Act, Mendicino said at the time. But Stewart said Mendicino didn't mean police directly asked for the law to be used. Oh, shameless. I believe the intention that he was trying to express was that law enforcement asked for the tools that were contained in the Emergencies Act. Oh, I see. Oh, now I get it. You're lying. And after you've watched the Trudeau government for long enough, it's pretty easy to tell. If they're talking, they're lying. No, what this was about was politics. Trudeau wanted to look tough. He thought it would benefit him politically. And just only if Fidel Castro had lived long enough to see it. He would have been so proud. Just all of that crushing of political dissent. All those people with those unacceptable views. Anyway, please subscribe, like, and share. Sharing really helps me out. I thank you for doing that. I will see you next time.